So today we're here with Taylor, and I'm so excited for her to get to share about her experience and kind of where she was at and where she is now. For some background info, Taylor finished the Embodied Method in the beginning of February. We just checked before we hit record, and we're both like, wow, that feels like a long time ago. And so, Taylor, I'd love if you can start by just sharing what your relationship with food and body was like prior to doing the Embodied Method.
Yes. So basically I feel like growing up, I was a part of like put into the diet culture very early. And my dad was an athlete and my mom had disordered eating. And, they were like, we're really healthy and we're like working out and doing all these diets all the time. But now having done this process, it was very disordered, their approach to food. And I think when I was around 9, that was my first time in Weight Watchers. So that was like my first introduction to the diet world. And I remember, I think I was in 5th grade and I lost a bunch of weight and I had gone through puberty around that time. So I was very young and I was just like in a developing body. And I was definitely not, in an unhealthy weight for my physique at the time, but I was a lot bigger than the other kids because I was only 9. And I remember like getting so much feedback from my teachers, my like 5th grade teachers telling my mom, like, she looks so great. Like, what have you guys done? And it's like insane. At the time, I was like, oh, this is so great. Like I'm getting positive feedback for weight loss, but I was like 9 or 10 years old, which is like insane. And then that was just like the start of the end for me. And for a long period of time before I did intuitive eating, it was just this process of going through diet culture and then failing at it and feeling like I didn't have control and like tried so many different things. I did Weight Watchers a couple more times. And then I did like the Atkins diet, which was like that was my probably worst dieting experience where I really felt like I felt like I was going to pass out. I felt so depressed because I was just not consuming enough carbohydrates to like create any type of dopamine or endorphins in my body. Like I just felt so drained. And then I was really like, this is terrible. And then in college, I gained a lot of weight when I first joined college because that was my first time with like having unbridled access to all food. So it's like you'd go into the dining hall, and you just have like unlimited food for as long as you wanted. And that was really when I felt out of control with food because I was just like, I can eat anything I want. My parents aren't here to tell me I can't eat that thing. And so I'm just going to do it. And so then that was my first couple of years of college. And then my junior year of college, I did another diet right before I came back my senior year. And that was probably like my least problematic diet, still a diet, but it was a lot more about like making sure you're eating. And I realized how good that felt. And it put also a huge emphasis on movement. Because in the past, when I was doing Weight Watchers or Atkins, it was really just about controlling your diet. And like they were say you need to work out too, but then I had no energy to work out. So this was like that first time where I was like, okay, I'm like still restricting my food, which wasn't the right thing to do. But I was like, wow, like I feel like I have more energy because the way that the diet had been constructed, it was like you're absorbing the food groups you're supposed to be, which I didn't understand that part of it. And then everything kind of came to fruition my senior year when you came to visit, my friend Jamie, who you are really good friends with. And I remember we were like sitting in the backyard and talking about intuitive eating, and you were just like sharing all this stuff with me, and it was like a light bulb went off my head where I'm like, oh my God, like there's another option. Like you don't have to just like binge eat food incessantly and have no control or restrict the hell out of your food. Like there's this middle ground where you're at peace with food. Like that just felt so crazy to me. So then I spent the next year or two really trying to figure out how to implement that in my life, but not really knowing where to start. And it just felt like really difficult to begin this journey on my own. And I tried like reading the books and doing those things like that, but I was like, it just had such a hold on everything I was doing. And then when I started seeing my partner now, I think that was when I really had another final light bulb moment where I was like, my food intake is impacting like every single parcel of my life. Like everything I'm doing is like I'm consumed by food thoughts constantly. Like I don't feel good. I was getting into arguments with my partner about food because I was like wanting, like when I would binge, he'd be like, are you okay? Like what's going on? Like this, like we just ate a meal and you're now consuming so much more food. And I was like really defensive over that. And then realizing like, okay, I really don't feel good and I need to figure this out. So then that's when I reached out to you and we did intuitive eating. And that was sort of like this beautiful hurrah moment in my food relationship life.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for just taking us through your story,
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
my whole
like
life.
from those beginning years of like being put on Weight Watchers from such a young age and kind of how that started, like hopping from diet to diet. And I think the piece about there being like a couple little light bulb moments like would really resonate with someone listening, because sometimes like you hear it and it's like, okay, cool, but like, I actually don't think that would work for me or whatever. And then like
Right.
it takes sometimes going through it continuously to be like, I need to find another way. Like this just isn't it.
Yes, definitely. I remember one of the like biggest moments for me, and the thing that was holding me back so much from starting intuitive eating that we talked about in our, I think, consultation meeting or our first meeting, was when I was like, what if this doesn't work? And I think that that's such a diet mindset like idea. Now I'm realizing that afterwards, but at the time, it's like when you're doing diets all the time, you are meant to fail at them. So then you fail at them and then you feel like a failure and you're like I'm back to square one. I've like failed at this thing. I have no self-control. It's like this really self-deprecating process. And I remember when I first went to intuitive eating, I'm like, if this doesn't work, if I'm come out of this and I'm still, like binging and all these things, like what am I going to do? Like, how does this work? And you were like, it can't not work. Like,
Yeah.
it's not how the process is. It's like, and I've been in therapy. So I think for me, like comparing it to therapy made sense to me, where it's like, even if you have a really bad therapist and you go into it, you're still like, it still will provide some help. Like you will be able to talk out things, you'll be given some tools, like and worst case scenario, like you're still at where you were, like you're not going to regress. And I
Right.
think that with a diet, it's like you lose weight or, you have all of these like progressions in that diet where your body changes and you think that you're like succeeding. And then you can when you go backwards, that's when you feel like you failed it. But with intuitive eating, it's like you're starting at this base level of like being really having a really disordered relationship with food and feeling really out of control around food and binging, for me, binging all the time and all these things. And it's like worst case scenario, you just stay at that place. So it's like you didn't lose anything, you're not going backwards, but like the reality is like there's just no chance that you go through this process and acquire nothing from it.
Yeah.
And I think I acquired a lot from it, but I think that was what was holding me back so long. And it
Yeah.
was just like this fear that like if I fail at this, then like what else is there?
Right. Oh my gosh, you bring up such a good point. Like the going into it as thinking of it as a diet. Like, and the truth is
Yes.
you literally can't fail, because intuitive eating is like a self-discovery process about you, your
Yes.
body's cues, the way you feel in your body. And so that we're so used to only thinking of like failing or succeeding, because that's what diet culture primes us with. And so like
Yeah.
to conceptualize a way where there is no like falling off the wagon or like failing, like
Yes.
it just, there is only learning about your body and how it reacts to things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've even had moments like, because this is also another huge thing is that like intuitive eating, like with anything, when you're doing self improvement and self work, is like you're going to have moments where you might, I always want to say slip up, but just like have learning moments. Now that I've learned that like the language I still struggle with sometimes, but like now, even if I had like the other day, I had a moment where I just like ate a lot of food that was not nourishing to my body. I didn't feel good. I ate a little bit more than my body was wanting that day. And I just felt like kind of sluggish. And it's like, I still have that initial thought in my head of like, oh no, like, then I'm like, okay, like you're fine. This is just a learning process. Now you know how that made you feel. And it's like so
Yeah.
freeing to not be
Yeah.
held down by these like feelings that you're screwing up, that you're doing something wrong. It's like, okay, like I learned from that, probably shouldn't have done that, move on. And like that's just so different than any way in the past that I would have thought about, you know,
Right.
having a moment like that with food.
Yeah, right. And if we just take that in like, if you were in the other reality, which is like the diet reality, the binge restrict reality would have been like, okay, you like quote unquote slipped up and then you berate yourself, you shame yourself, and then you spiral.
Yes.
And how do you deal with the shame? Well, you might turn to more food and then you just dig yourself deeper and deeper. And there's no chance to like learn from it and like store that in your memory and your body. Instead, it's like push it
Yes.
under the rug. That was uncomfortable. And then the future comes and you maybe do the same thing again because you didn't give yourself a chance to like experience and reflect.
Yes, definitely. And just like checking in with yourself. Like I'd never done that before. And I think that was really crazy. And it's applies to so many things in my life now, but like with there'll be moments, and I know maybe we'll talk about this more later, but with like smoking weed,
Yeah.
how like there's like I will physically want to eat food and it's like it's I've never been able to like, okay, check in with yourself. Like, is your body actually wanting food right now? Or is it like your brain, because you're high wanting food,
Yeah.
and having that conversation with yourself, like was not possible for me before. I just didn't know that was an option. And now it's like, I know, and it used to be like, if I eat one thing, then I'm done for the night. Like it's just going to create this crazy
Right.
binge. Like if I taste the particles of food on my tongue, then like my high is done. I'm eating everything in creation in my
Right.
house. And I remember like, it's like that whole thing, like if you're drinking and they're like, once you break the seal and pee, then you're just gonna be peeing the whole night. Like it was like that
Which
same
like I heard
idea.
that was never true, by the
I
way.
know. I don't think it
Yeah.
is true. It makes no
Well,
sense.
you're
But
describing
yeah,
like the all or nothing. Like if I have a thing, then
yes,
like fuck it, it's out the window. This night's written off, and I might as well just
yes.
like say I'm going to be uncomfortable and binge myself into oblivion.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes like if I'm feeling comfortable, I'll eat like something small, and see how I feel. But it's like this process, it's like takes a little bit more energy because when you're high, like your brain's not functioning at a normal capacity. But I like now know I'm like, okay, just keep checking in with yourself and be aware of how your body's feeling. And if I just ate and I'm just like trying to like smoke a little weed before I go to bed, it's like you don't need to eat right now. Like that's not the purpose of doing this, like so I think like being able to divorce those two things, as like smoking doesn't mean you have to eat everything in the world. Like in college, we would just like it was insane. We would smoke weed and then just like order Domino's and food. And I would consume so much food and I would sneak food all the time. Like I remember doing that where if I was at my parents or something, I'd be like sneaking to grab food and then hiding the bags of the food in my garbage cans so that my dad would come in and be like, what happened? Why did you eat all this?
Yeah.
And now it's like, I'm just like not worried about it. Like if whatever food I put in my body, like I trust myself to know that I need it at that moment, or that at least this will be a learning moment, tomorrow where I'll be
Yeah.
able to reflect on it. So it's
Yeah.
like never a bad moment where I'm like chastising myself for anything.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Taylor, I'm like, it's so exciting to catch up with you in real time and like hear about these updates, because I know you messaged me when the binge eating when high like podcast episode came out. And so it's exciting
Yes.
to hear how your thought process has changed around that. And that's really a reflection of like all the work you've done, because that moment of just like checking in seems small, but it's actually a product of like having unconditional permission to eat and like having done
Yes.
all this other work. So I'd love to hear you kind of walk through like, where are you now? What's your relationship with food kind of after doing the embodied method, after becoming an intuitive eater?
Yeah. So I think it's like, it's this great relationship with myself and trusting myself. I think that's like the main thing that is super important, is like food is not that important. Like of course it nourishes us and it's important to like keep us going, keeping us healthy. But I think like it just consumed so much of my life. Like I would go hang out with friends or family and be like, I really hope that we like go out to eat. Like, what will we eat? Like that would consume my whole thought process during that environment, like that during that experience. And now it's like just so freeing. Like I know, like I'm not worrying about what I'm going to eat. And if I am hungry, I used to feel really embarrassed. Like, oh, people are going to think like, wow, she's asking that for food. And now it's like, it's just food. Like I can say like, hey, I'm feeling pretty hungry. Can we go eat something? And I don't feel out of control. I know that I can stop eating when I'm full and like take some home and eat it later. Like that's okay. And like, I think the biggest thing for me was the scarcity mindset that like, I need to eat it all now because I'm not going to be able to eat it later. And now I really don't feel that way at all about anything. Like it just feels so like if I want to eat that tomorrow, I'll eat it tomorrow. And then sometimes I'll do that and have something 2 days in a row. And then I'm like, all right, I'm over that thing.
Yeah.
And just like being able to check in with myself, I think is really great. But it's also like it's like this constant journey, but in this beautiful way, not like this like slugging around and feeling like you're like burdened by all these thoughts and the outside world's coming in. It's like I feel like I'm constantly having moments where I do overeat sometimes, and nothing compared to how I did in the past, but feeling just so much less judgmental about myself and trusting myself with food. And the biggest thing I think is just being able to like check in with myself and not even forgive myself, but just like understand what my body's feeling in those moments. I think like this past week with stress and emotional eating, I think like realizing when that's happening much earlier on in the process so that I can be like, okay, I'm really stressed out right now. And that's why I want to eat food. And like being able just to recognize that, I think has changed my life. Like that's where I'm at right now, is like, it's been a pretty stressful like couple weeks. There's a lot of personal things going on in my life and everything, but it's like food's no longer an issue. I'm not like worried. So then it like allows me to think more clearly about what is going on in my life and how I can show up for those things and how to process those things. I think that's like the biggest thing for me, is it's not like this light switch gets flipped and like now you're like, oh, I'm just like working out all the time and being super like great with movement and just like eating super great all the time. Like that's not life, that's like that, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be that way. And just like giving yourself permission to just like live your life, I think that is just so different than how it was before and really great
Yeah.
now.
Oh my God, Taylor, I'm so like beaming right now. I'm so freaking proud
Yeah,
of you
me
and so
too.
excited for you. It's so cool to hear kind of the like, where is she now update. And one thing that I love that you're hitting on is like this realistic approach. Like we know into diet culture is so not realistic. It's like burn 5 pounds
Right.
in a day, like these like crazy
Yes.
results that like are like not healthy or sustainable or realistic at all. And what's really cool is like with intuitive eating, like you're saying, it's not like you never eat past comfortable fullness, but like you just said, it's
Right.
like the intensity and the magnitude and the frequency of these binges like slowly starts decreasing. Like you mentioned, it's not like a
Yes.
light switch where it's like everything's fine now. It's like slowly it kind of fades to the background. And then you look back over time and it's like, oh, this isn't taking up space in my life in the way it used to, but it's a slow
Yeah.
progression.
Yes, definitely. And to just like my relationship with myself, like you had mentioned this when we had first started the work, but it just infiltrates in a positive way every part of your life when I went on this intuitive eating journey. Cause it's like learning to check in with yourself about like how you're feeling about your body and how you're feeling in your body and all of that. Like it really, that has to extend to like how emotionally you feeling. How is that affecting your desire for food? Like, are you being triggered to eat because you're feeling a lot of emotions right now and you're trying to like satiate that desire? Like whenever I feel the urge to binge, like figuring out why I'm feeling that way, then it's like I'm addressing these things about like my mental state that I before would just ignore and eat. And so it's like there's like multiple things that get addressed in my life because I'm doing it, or I'm on this intuitive eating journey. I think that's what's so great about it, is like every part of my life has been positively impacted by this experience.
Yeah. It's the coolest part of the work, in my opinion, is like
Yeah,
the food. Yeah, it's great. It's great to feel in
right.
control around food and at peace. But what's really cool is to like have more mental real estate to deal with what's important to you and, to have more peace and have it kind of like overflow into other parts of life. So I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear you kind of chat through like what feels like some of the most significant ripple effects that you've seen as a result of becoming an intuitive eater.
Yeah, definitely. I think like the number one thing is just being able to show up. Like especially now I'm working pretty remotely for my jobs, and a lot of it involves like us having a meeting over lunchtime or something. And I think before I just would not have been able to think clearly during that time period because I've just been thinking about food. So just being able to like show up and enjoy times with other people and not worrying about like how this is going to affect me if there's food that's around or like as an option. Kiwis here. I think that is been like the main thing that's really changed my life. And then more specifically, like my relationship and dealing with stress. I think like I'm in therapy, but like this was such a great compliment to that, because it was like that I didn't realize how much that was consuming my mental real estate. And I didn't have like the capacity mentally, because like 50% to 60% of my brain, it just felt like was taken out by food thoughts. And I just didn't have the energy to go dissect the other emotions I was feeling. I was just like thinking about food. And I feel like now I have all that space in my head to like find peace and neutrality and, not feel like I have to figure this out immediately. Just like finding this calm, I think, and again, trusting myself. Like I had no trust in myself to be able to do anything. Like when it came to taking care of my physical or mental health, like I just been taught time and time again, especially at my physical body, that like couldn't be trusted to take care of it, that I couldn't
Yeah.
be trusted to, nourish it. And I had to rely on all these other sources. And now it just feels like I know I can do it. So I
Totally.
think that's
Yeah.
like my relationship with myself is like the best it's ever been, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I feel it too. Like I really feel it coming through in just like
Yeah.
how you carry yourself and your energy. And you're hitting on again, like the to me, one of the most evil parts of diet culture, which is that it robs you of your trust with yourself. And that bleeds
Yes.
into other parts of life. It's not just like, oh, hey, you can't trust yourself to govern what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. It's also, if you start to outsource your body knowledge about like how to eat to like a calorie tracking app or a point system, or a set of time frames that is appropriate to eat and whatever, well, then
Yeah.
that sends a message to your body of like, we can't trust the emotions we're feeling or the experiences we're having or any of these things. And that
Yes.
is so detrimental. And it boils my blood to think about like really how harmful those effects
Yes.
are.
Yeah. This is like a little bit random, but I was in the car today and my phone broke. So I was listening to the radio, which I haven't done in a while. And I'm like on the station, it cuts to a commercial and it's about like burning fat for the summer and like this, like, you want your summer body and summer's here and you feel like you can't do it. So now like go to like this doctor and you can have like these procedures. And I literally was like, next, like, I'm not listening to this anymore. Like it's just not the reality of life. Like, and I just feel so like whenever I see advertisements or stuff, I'm like, I'm not interested. Like, I'm just like not here for it anymore. And I think before that would have really consumed me mentally thinking about like, oh, summer is here. And like,
Right.
and realizing that like, I'm the one that has to live in this body and I need to be comfortable in it. And like no one else that's comfortable with themselves is going to be thinking about my body or worrying about it. It's just like not how that works. And I think that's been really freeing too. It's just like knowing that very few people are worrying about like what I look like in a bathing suit, like especially and like particularly people that are comfortable with themselves, like the people that I would want to be surrounded with that I want to love and to love me are not worrying about that. And it's like not a reflection of me what someone thinks of that.
Yes.
So I think that like because that was a huge part. Like I really struggled with body image going into all of this. And I feel a lot freer now. And it's like when I do start to feel well, with clothes, if something doesn't fit me now, I'm like, that doesn't fit me. Bye bye to that piece of clothing. Like, I'm not worrying about that. I'm not here to like fit into the clothes that don't fit me. Like, that's not how that works. So that's really nice.
Yeah.
But I think it's all,
I'm sorry. I'm like sitting here like, yes,
Right.
yes.
Yes. And like, I work at Free People. And so I'm constantly talking with like, older women, middle-aged women. And that's a constant conversation we're having all the time is like, like, I don't fit into that. Like after I lose this weight, I'll do this or whatever. And it's like, I'm like, we're just not doing that anymore. I'm like, it is 2022. Like we're putting that in the past. Like if it doesn't fit you, like I'll try stuff on constantly. I think that's been a really great experience too, is like, I'll go in and we got 10 new pieces in. So I'm just going to try them on. And it's like, sometimes all 10 of those pieces fit me. Like they don't fit, they're weird. And like, sometimes I'll go in and I'm not worrying about like whether it's a medium or a large or whatever. And sometimes I put a large on and it's like, I can't zip it up. And I'm like, and then I'm like, I hate those pants. Those are stupid pants that are sized weird. And like, I'm not worrying about that. It's not like, oh, I wish I had fit into those pants. Like,
it sounds like it's instead of placing that blame, it's like, no, this isn't about me. It's just simply this pants doesn't fit me. And there's no greater story here. Like I'm not a failure or like anything.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so cool. I want to hear you share a little bit more if you're comfortable about the body image piece, sort of walk us through what your body image looked like, felt like prior to doing intuitive eating work and sort of the after piece as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was always about weight. Like that was always a big conversation. I didn't know how to think about health outside of weight for my whole life. Like even like looking at other people and being like, okay, they're my height. Like, what do they weigh? Like, maybe I should weigh that much, like constantly comparing to other people and trying to figure out like what weight would look the best or whatever in my head. And then also just consuming so much media and I definitely went through a phase after end of college, like early out of college period where I like kind of purged my social media of any influencers that I felt were, hurting my mental health with my body and like promoting a certain image of like how someone should look. But even then it was like looking at plus size models or mid-size models that had different body types than what I did. So then that wasn't really, it's like, even if it's great to have plus size and mid-size women represented, but everybody in those categories is going to look different. And I think that was something I didn't understand. So I'm like, okay, like that person is the same clothing size as me and a similar weight, but like the way that their body is set up is just different. Like my belly comes out more than theirs does. And they have a really flat stomach, but like they wear a lot of their weight in their hips and like that looks better. Like, you know what I mean? Like having all these conversations with myself. And so then I was still just like struggling with finding peace with my body. And I think one of the greatest things that you shared with me was like, with a lot of things that I've applied this to so many things, like finding neutrality with yourself rather than just going from like a honestly like self-hatred to like self-loving, like I love my body and I'm so happy. Like you have to kind of take steps to get there, and like finding that place of just like, this is like the vessel that's carrying me, it's going to carry me for my whole life, and like finding appreciation for that and loving this, like your physical body, and knowing and trusting it to take care of itself, and trusting yourself to, you know, love yourself. I think like that, finding just that place of like peace with your body, I think for me was the biggest part of that journey. And then from there, just like realizing that like my body isn't tied to my self-worth. I think that was like my biggest problem or fear, was that like someone was going to judge me before. And I would like see someone, like a guy at a bar or something, and just like assume that like they were thinking certain things about my body, when it's like very unlikely that was happening. If it was happening, it didn't matter, you know. But
Right.
like I was constantly worried that like my body was going to somehow impact my relationship with other people and like the way that I operate in this world. Um, and that's coming from a place like I am in a more of a mid-sized body, but like I'm have a lot of like skinny privilege in a lot of ways, you know? So like it was just so much in my head, because like in the way that I was operating throughout life really was not being impacted that much by my body, my weight, you know? And I think just realizing like I've started like investing in clothing that like feels good on my body and like feels comfortable, and and just like not being upset with myself if something doesn't fit, or if like I have not weighed myself since we started the intuitive eating journey. And the other day I'm like, I can just feel that like I just feel a little different. I think maybe I've gained some weight. I'm not sure, you know, but it's not like this thing of like, oh my God, I've gained some weight. Like, let me go weigh myself and make sure that I haven't. And if I have, oh my God, what am I going to do? You know, it's like, it's just like this, okay, like, am I feeling okay in my body right now? Like, do I feel good? Like, have I been consuming foods that feel good to me? You know what I mean? And like checking in with myself and my body rather than like judging it for maybe having gained weight or whatever. And I've like, if I've been through a lot of stress lately and I have maybe been eating past comfortable fullness, you know, and that's maybe led to gaining weight. Like, it's just like, it's not this like terrifying thing anymore that like, if I gain weight, like I'm just going to be ostracized from the world, you know, that
Right.
like people love me for me and it doesn't have to do with my weight, you know?
Yeah. Oh my God, Taylor, it's so beautiful to hear you talk through the body image piece. Like the part about your worth being beyond your body, of like, people love me for me, like for who I am beyond this body that I happen to be, you know, like my soul happens to be like contained in for like the time that I'm, you know, living in this dimension, to get very
Yes.
heady, is, it's so clear. Again, I can feel it. Like your confidence is not hinging on, it's not in this susceptible place of like, am I up a pound? Am I down a pound? You know, like
Yes.
what am I looking like? Do the pants fit? And that's a really susceptible place for confidence to be, because what we know for certain is that your body will change throughout life. Like we're
Yes.
human beings in nature. We're not robots. Like our bodies are changing. Things might sag or whatever. If you choose to have children, your body
Yeah.
will change. And so having your confidence be coming from this deep internal place that is beyond your physical form is a much more stable place for your confidence to come from, because it's not this like ever-changing vessel that is your body.
Yeah. And I think understanding how like the like what you're eating, what you're putting into your body, like rather than micromanaging it, but just being aware of how that will impact physically how you look, eat on the day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. You know, like if you're consuming a lot of salts, like the way that your body like could create bloating, or you know what I mean? Like if you like just understanding how like consuming different things is just going to change your body throughout the day. If you like wake up first thing in the morning and haven't eaten, and then you eat a meal, like your body's going to look a little bit different after you eat that meal, you know? And like, that's okay. Like
Right.
understanding that like regardless of how, like, as we age, our bodies are going to change, like every day, every hour, our bodies are constantly changing. And I think just like when you're in a diet mindset, that's so crippling because you can't control it. You can't like, how are you going to control and micromanage like every single piece of your body in that way? It's just impossible. So you constantly feel like you're failing. But just when
Right.
you like accept it, in not in like a giving up way, but just like finding peace with it, I think that is really great. Where you're like, okay, like I had like a lot of salty foods last night and I woke up this morning, I'm feeling very bloated, you know, or like
Yeah.
I'm getting my period, so I'm feeling very
Yes.
bloated, and not being like, oh my God, like I can't believe that this is happening. I can't zip up those jeans or whatever. You know, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to put on something comfortable today. Like, and we'll deal with, we'll just like deal with
Right.
the day as at hand.
Right. Oh my gosh. It's such this lack of resisting the inevitable, and instead like
Yes.
finding just this peace and just like surrender to like, I am a thing in nature. Like I'm changing literally, like if you're a person who has a menstrual cycle, like, yeah, you're literally going through a cycle, or, you're subject to stress, which could impact metabolism, which could impact how
Yes.
your body appears. Like all of these things there's infinite things that could cause changes in fluctuations in physical
Right.
appearance. And I love that you're bringing up this piece. Like it's not giving up. It's just like, it's like surrendering for
Yes.
the sake of peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. It's like, it's very like, there's this Florence and the Machine song called Never Let Me Go. And she talks about how like, I'm not giving up, I'm just giving in. It's
I was
just
gonna
like
say
giving
that.
in.
I was gonna say it's not giving up, it's giving in. And I was like, where's that coming from?
Yes. And it's like such a great line because I'm like, that is what it is. It's just like, it's giving into like existing, like just exist and like enjoy existing and just don't cloud it any more than it has to be. Like, I think like the biggest thing about intuitive eating is like our bodies know intuitively, as the name suggests, that like it knows how to nourish itself, it knows what it wants to eat, it knows like what to crave, that like, and we're just like that judgment's clouded for so long, and that starts to apply to everything in our lives. Like there are times when like I would look in the mirror and be like, I feel comfortable in my body. When I look in the mirror, it looks like a certain way, and that picture looks a certain way, and like just feeling so clouded from all these other things, rather than just being like, what does it feel like to exist in my body right now? Like that's the most important thing. Like 99% of my day, I'm not looking in a mirror. So like what I'm existing in my body. So like, what does that experience feel like? Cause that's like most of your life, you're existing in your body. So you want
Right.
that to be enjoyable.
Yeah, this difference between the focus being on how I look versus the focus being on how I feel. I love that
Yeah.
you kind of made that comparison of like, I spend most of my time feeling how I feel in my body, not looking, because how you're not looking in a mirror constantly every single day.
Right.
So therefore, how I feel is so important. I'm
Yes.
curious, Taylor, if there's a moment that you remember in throughout our work together of being like, I'm starting to get like something's turned, it's clicking.
Yes. I feel like it was very interesting or unique, I guess, when we started our work, because I'd already like been spending so much time thinking about intuitive eating and trying to implement it, but not really understanding what it was, and like still applying like diet concepts to intuitive eating. So like that was making it difficult. And I think when it was early on, but when you would say like, okay, like after every meal, or just like at certain points throughout the day, when you wake up, when you go to bed, like middle of the day, just like have a check-in with your body and write down how you're feeling. And like, are you feeling uncomfortable or neutral or comfortable, like whatever you're feeling in your skin. And like, I just had never done that before. Like it was so, it seems so like, duh, like check in with yourself. But like, I just had never, it would always be like check in with your mental state, and never like check in with your like mental and physical state.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, what are you physically feeling? Like, are you thirsty? Like, and not just about like, are you full, hungry, like, what's your body feeling? Do you feel dehydrated? Like, do you feel tired? Like all those different
Right.
things, and doing those on the weekly checklist, like checking in with myself that way. I think that's when I started to really notice like, oh, I can do that. And I am capable of checking in with myself and actually like understanding what's going on in my body, and even just like writing it down at first. I'm like, I don't know if this is right. And then it's like, yeah, it is, like, because your body, what
Yeah.
you're feeling in your skin. You're the only one that would know that. So it's like that, I think, was so huge. That was like when I first started to be like, whoa, like I can actually do this. Like it's not this
Yeah.
impossible thing where like you're checking in with yourself and it's like you have to like do meditation, all these things. It's like it's it's as simple as just like being like, okay, how do I feel right now?
Right. Right. Totally. And it's like, that's a very dusty kind of like muscle when you've been chronically
Yes.
dieting, because really, like, and I always say, when you're dieting, you're living shoulders up. Like it's all in the head. It's that mental gymnastics. But then with intuitive eating, you like you're saying, you start dropping into like, how do I feel in there? What's going on? And like
Yes.
at first it feels hard because that muscle is kind of like weak. It's not used to being flexed. And then
Yes.
the more you do it, the more you go in and you're like, what about now? What about now? Eventually, like that muscle gets really strong, and it happens just reflexively, where you're not even like saying like, I need to intentionally check in right now. It's just like, you just are like you would
Yes.
be breathing or peeing.
Yes. And I think it's like I'll feel a binge coming on, and which happens all the time. And then I'll know that I'll feel the urge to eat after I just ate, which I think like triggers for me I'm like, okay, am I hungry right now? Which is not impossible for that to be the case. Sometimes I am, and I eat some more because I didn't eat enough. But I think like just having that, like being so conscious of what's going on and not doing it in this like derivative way, but just like genuinely like organically feeling like, okay, I want to eat some more. Like, why do I want to eat some more? Do I feel like this is a really good meal that I won't have access to later, and that's why I want to eat more? Like, what's exactly going on? And then being able to check in with myself, like then that's like basically what prevents the binges from happening. That small little conversation in my head for a couple seconds, just checking in with myself, is what helps me like know what my body wants, rather than just listening to what my brain is kind of telling me in that time, or
Right.
craving or whatever it is.
Right. Right. And so much of like what your brain is craving also has to do with these like old pathways and old thoughts
Yes.
about like you have to have it now because it's going to be taken away. And sometimes it's as
Yes.
simple as like that reminder of like, okay, hey, that used to be true, but actually now like this food is literally allowed tomorrow if we want it, or in an
Yes.
hour if we want it.
Yes. I remember, because I feel like we've talked about this, but like the idea of like salad. Salad was so, like before I did this, I was like, people that eat salad are just like trying to be healthy, and like it's so annoying. Like salad's gross. And then we like when people have salad with pizza, I'm like, we're eating pizza. Like, why would you? And then like I feel like since I've done this journey, like I found salads that I like and how to prepare them that I like them, and it's like such a great compliment to pizza. And I love pizza, so I'll go and get like a little Neapolitan pizza down near my apartment, and then I'll bring it up, and I'm like, okay, I'll eat as much as pizza as I want, but complementing that with like a really crispy fresh salad feels really like on my taste buds feels really good and it's nice and refreshing. But then on top of it, it's also like really my body feels better afterwards. Like I feel like, okay, like I'm not like I never beat myself about eating pizza even if I don't have salad with it. But like when I eat with salad, I just feel, or with a green, it just feels like I don't feel hungry after that. I don't feel like I need to eat more of something. Like I just feel good,
Yeah.
and like satiated. Um, and so I think like that's been really cool for me to see. And then on top of that, the other day I went to get tacos with Jake's mom. And I've always been like, I just like don't like leafy greens. I'm just like, I've kind of been that person. And I'm like slowly transitioning out of that. But I've always like on tacos and stuff, I'm like, I don't want like anything. And then she's like, just try this taco, and it had lettuce on it. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, that's really good. And it just tasted like crunchy and fresh with like the meat and the taco. And I was like, oh my God. And it just like felt like this weird taste buds changing, like brain changing moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, like by having like your body knows when you're like combining all these different food groups in a way that's going to be nutritious and like helpful to your body. Like my
Right.
taste buds and my brain, like everything was just like in that moment, like this is going to feel really good if you eat this,
Right.
And I'm like,
It's like,
that's so
right.
crazy.
Oh, I love that. I love that moment. I
Normally I'm
remember.
picking the lettuce off, and this
Right.
time
And
I'm
it
like,
makes sense that historically you would, because like you just shared, like salad represented like, diets or like low points on Weight Watchers. So like, no shit, you wouldn't want to eat
right,
it because that's like, riddled with like upsetting times. And like,
right.
it represents like almost like a punishment. I love to hear you share your journey with your relationship with salad changing.
Yes.
I love it. It's so cool. And I so many clients have shared something similar where they're like, I can't believe you can actually eat a salad because you want it and not just because you feel like you have to.
Yes. And sometimes it's like, it's again, like I'm always fighting with those diet culture things that have come over. And sometimes I'm like, oh, like, do I want to salad? But then I'm like, okay, how's that salad going to feel after, or just like start the process? Like, I think sometimes I'm like, oh, do I want to prepare a salad? Like salads, I still like have that conversation in my head. And then I'm like, just make it. If you don't like it, you don't eat it. You know what I mean? Like just,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, start eating it. And I'm like, I feel full. I feel good. Like
Yeah.
you put like little croutons, you put some carbs things and proteins and everything in, and it just feels like really fresh and clean afterwards. And I'm like, my body, like I'm not having like a stomach ache after I eat it. I'm like, okay, like this is really nice,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, Taylor. I like my cheeks hurt from smiling. It is
I know.
so beautiful to hear all of these like little anecdotes of like how intuitive eating has kind of like showed up in your life in like the past several months since we finished together, and body image too. I'm curious, what would you say to someone who's like on the fence and is like, I don't know, like I'm scared to go all in with intuitive eating? What might you share with them?
I think I would say like I felt the same way and like spent so much of my life really lost and just feeling out of control. And it's like, especially with food. And I think it's like a matter of being like, this is a moment to invest in yourself and like show yourself some love, is when like society and and yourself have just been beating yourself up for so long. And I think like just giving yourself that break and trusting yourself to just try this out, you know? And I think that like that was the biggest thing for me, and trusting you, and trusting people giving testimonials, and trusting that like this is a process that really can't fail as long as you commit like a little bit to it, you know, like just try it. And I think it's so hard sometimes to trust when for so long you've been taught like you can't trust yourself, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and you're going to fail, and just all of this like negativity being spewed into you from diet culture and doing all these diets and just like experiencing the world in that way. But I think it's like finally like just take a breath and like just learn to trust people and yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And like if anything, there's just nothing that bad that can come out of this process. There's just not, you know. I think like it's so hard to again trust that someone's telling you that, because I think like diet culture is constantly saying manipulative things that are veiled as being helpful, and that can, so it's really scary. You're like, I'm going to trust this new thing again and it's not going to work. But it's like it's just, it's going to help. Like it's not a cure all. And I think that's like a really important part of it, is like when things are like, you'll just like fix it up and it'll be perfect. That's when
Right.
you have to be nervous. But I think like this is not to say that everything's going to be perfect overnight, but it's like you're going to invest in yourself and invest in this process that's going to like make your life more fulfilling, and let you be able to show up for yourself, for your friends, your family, your partners, whatever it is. And I think like that's should be that push. That was the push for me over the edge, where I was just like, I need to heal this relationship with myself, you know?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
food can't, like, how can food be that important that it's just consuming everything? Like,
Yeah.
I need to be able to like live my life and not be worrying about this all the time. And I think like if someone's on the fence, maybe just like for a week, couple days, just like try to be super conscientious of when you're thinking about food and when it's happening. And it's all the time. Like the second I started to be like, how much am I thinking about food? Like, is it really in my brain that much? And like, I just spent a couple days, that's sort of like the days leading up to reaching out to you. I was like, oh my God, like it's consuming every second of in different forms. Like, it's like, whether it's a binge, whether it's me not being able to show up and spending time with someone because I'm thinking about what we're going to eat, whether it's me overeating and feeling comfortable and having to be in the bathroom for an hour because I like grossly ate past comfortable fullness and then was really ill because of that, you know, like, and eating foods that like really hurt my stomach, but eating it anyways because it was like these special foods that like I wouldn't be able to eat. So let's just eat it anyways. And like, whatever, if it happens, it happens. Like, just realizing how many different forms it takes throughout the day and how much energy that's taking up. I think that's like, for me, was like, okay, this is a process that is really important for me to go on, you know?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those words. And I think the piece about you've been burned before, like, yeah, you've been told like all these diets will work and all these things, but
Yeah.
like we said in the beginning, this is just different in the fact that it is just not a diet. It's not something outside of yourself. It's giving you tools to go inside. So that's like how I always kind of explain to folks who are like, wait, but what's the difference? I'm like, the difference is this is you. Like, we're not giving you anything you don't already have. We're just removing the gunk of all the shit that you've gleaned in diet culture over, you know, your lifetime.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's like, because like the title of diet and dietitian, I feel like has been so tainted by diet culture. And so it's like, it's so hard to differentiate between those things. I have family members that have dietitians that they're working with right now, and it's very different than intuitive eating, you know, like they have a
Yep.
schedule of food and the workouts that they have to do and the calories they have to count and the vitamins they have to take. And it's just like so different. So I think it's like, I can understand that hesitation and being like, well, this is a dietitian and this is like intuitive eating. Is it a diet? Like, how does this work? You know, and I think my biggest work with you was like getting the language to speak about these different things that have been going on for so long, because you just don't know how to speak about it. Like a scarcity minds. I didn't know what that was. That the fact that like you thinking you can't eat that food makes you want that food really bad. And that's what creates this, you know, out of control feeling when you're around it. Like, I just didn't know that that's what was happening.
Yeah.
So it just felt like having the language to speak about things, I think helps you think about them better, helps you be conscious of what's going on and be able to,
Totally.
you know, find that peace with yourself.
Yeah. Language is so powerful. I had a discovery call
Yeah.
this morning and she was saying like, I had always been experiencing these things, but only recently have I come to realize like, oh, there's a name for that. Wow. Like it's incredibly validating to realize like you were so not alone, so much so that like there's a whole like slew of words and a whole glossary of
Yes.
terms to describe what you're experiencing.
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add about your story, your journey that we didn't cover?
I feel like just being patient with yourself, like that's probably like the most important thing is like, cause I think when we were first started doing work together, and if I would have a binge, it would just feel like I'd be like, oh my gosh, okay. So I have to go like talk to Leah and tell her that I had a binge. Like this feeling that like someone else is gonna yell at you and that like there's someone else keeping you accountable and all these things. Like it's just like I never felt that way in this process with you. And I think it's like I love you so much. This has been such a great experience with you. But I think it's really a testament to like how much you love like your clients and like the work that you're doing. And it just never felt like I felt really comfortable to talk about like everything that had happened that week or 2 weeks and how my relationship with food had been and without facing any like judgment from it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it was just a really freeing process. And then that's what sort of allowed me to like take responsibility for myself. Cause it's always like, you can't like, you don't have the power to even do it yourself. Like that's what diet culture tells you all the time is that like, you don't have the ability to do it on your own. So then like those initial couple weeks, you're like, okay, so Leah's gonna like, tell me that I'm doing this wrong. I need to do this, and it's just like, and then that doesn't happen. And you're like, and you're instead guided to do that work yourself and like
Mm.
get back in control of yourself, and I think that was really rewarding in this
Yeah.
experience. Yeah.
Oh, Taylor, thank you for saying that. I'm thinking about the quote, give a man a fish, he'll have food for a day, teach a man to fish, he'll have
Yes.
food for a life. And I really think about that, like being prescribed a meal plan or like a calorie goal or whatever is really like being given a fish. Like you're tethered to
Yes.
that thing. And then without that exterior support, you're lost. And I think becoming an intuitive eater and being empowered to like understand your own body's cues is learning to fish. It's like having these skills for life. Like my goal is that you don't need me. I don't want you to be a customer for life like Weight Watchers does. Like that would
Right.
be horrible for me,
Right. Right.
So it's just so different. And
Yes.
yeah, the expectation that like, when is the other foot going to drop? Like, when am I going to be berated? Because that's the history with coming from diet to
Yes.
diet is so valid. And realizing like, wait, I'm not going to be shamed. I'm just going to be like gently encouraged to reflect
Right.
how absolutely revolutionary.
Right. No, absolutely. It's kind of like my dad's a teacher and he would always talk about this, how like if you're teaching your students and they all take a test and like 80% of them fail that exam, then you didn't do a good job teaching them. You know what I mean? Like that's a reflection of you as a teacher. If like your students don't know the material, then you didn't do a good job, And I think that's like, and most people like don't think of it in that way, but that applies to so many different things. Like if a diet's telling you like, this is what you need to do, and you do that thing and you still can't maintain what they've promised you, then that's a failure of the diet. It's not a
Yes.
failure of you, And I think
Yes.
that like, that's what you're just like taught to ignore that, like all the time students are like, oh, I can't believe that we all failed it. Like this class is so hard and all these things. Like, no, you're not being taught correctly or led correctly,
Right.
And I think that like with the work with you, it was never like that. It's just like you giving us that like gentle nudge to like communicate with ourselves, and do the work with ourselves. And it was like, you'd be like, here, you can do these readings. And if you don't, then that's okay too, and like, here's some extra stuff that in the workbook that you could do this week. And if you don't, that's okay too, like
Yeah.
just being treated like an adult. Like, I feel like diets treat you
Yeah.
like an incompetent child all the time. And it's like, do you understand how many calories that you need to eat today in order for the like calorie deficits and blah, blah, blah. And this was just like, how about you just like how everything works in life as an adult, like, just like get like listen to yourself, have a conversation with yourself, like reflect on yourself and do that work internally with a little guidance if you need it.
Yeah. I've never thought of it in that way, is like diets are like treating you like a child. Like
Yeah.
here's everything you have to do. Like, and it's giving you no credit for your own body knowledge or wisdom.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to think about it like that. And the part about I love what you said about your dad. And if 80% of the class fails, like that's a failure of the teacher. And I think the same thing true, like the comparison you're making with diets. There's a statistic that 95% of people who lose weight on diets regain all the weight, if not more, within 5 years. So
Right.
hello, failure of the teacher, aka failure of the system that is diet.
Yes.
Diet culture. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And then we're taught like a lot of students are taught, that like it's because you didn't study, it's because you didn't apply yourself, it's because of this or that or this or that. And it's like that's not how that works,
Yeah.
like there's like a level to it where you have to be engaged. But even if you're doing all those things and it still doesn't work, then that's not, your fault. And like, and it's asking unreasonable things of its, you know, clients or whatever in diet culture. It's asking you to do things that really aren't sustainable anyway, because it's built that way. But yeah, I just think that like it was really awakening for me to be like, oh my gosh, like I can I can trust myself. Georgie's like, yes, screw diet
Intuitive
culture.
eating.
Yeah, intuitive eating. But yeah, no, I think it was, yeah, it was really eye-opening to be like, okay, I can do it and like I'll be
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Taylor, thank you so much. You have so much to be proud of. I am so proud of you. And I hope you
Thank
continue to
you.
celebrate yourself and the beautiful success you've had. And I always just like to say too, like, it hasn't even been a year for you. Like, it'll be so cool to
Yeah.
just like continue to like the lettuce on the tacos is like a cool milestone of like, wait, I actually like lettuce on tacos. They'll continue to be
Yes.
these milestones of like, oh, my first like, Halloween as an intuitive eater, noticing how I feel around the candy or whatever it is. So
Yes.
it's only the
I
beginning.
know.
It's the exciting part.
Yeah. I think we started in November of last year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we did November, December, January, February. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's really only been like what, 4 or 5, like 6 months, like
Yeah.
maybe half a year. So I think like that, because when you said February that we had finished, I'm like, that feels long ago, but also like not that long ago. Like I feel like I've done like so much has changed in, since February even. And it like feels like I've been doing this for so long, like just
Yeah.
the like how different I feel. And so I think I was like, oh, like February, wow, like it's already, June. But then I'm like,
Yeah.
I thought like it'd been like a year, you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
feels like such a longer time because I don't know, I'm just like able to like live my life more
Yeah.
fully.
Right. Oh my gosh, more can happen in a short amount of time when you're not as
Yes.
preoccupied with food thoughts. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
definitely. Yeah.
it'll be exciting to do like another Where Is She Now and hear about the latest intuitive eating updates. But thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on and sharing so openly and honestly about your story. And I know this will resonate with so many people and provide inspiration. So thank you.
Thank you. You're the best. I really appreciate you.